everyone, I've been meaning to finish off a few items that I've had sat stored on my computer, videos that I have taped but I haven't got time or haven't had the time to get round to editing. So this should be fairly quick and easy for me to talk you through, but it really is a nice technique and I'm sure that you can use it with whichever stamps you would like to use. I'm going to be using this Gorjuss stamp and it is one of those stamps that's really lends itself to being used on a book page, and I love to use old book pages in my crafting, as you all know if you watch my videos, and this card is quick and easy to do, but it really is effective. So the measurements for this card are a little bit unusual because I needed them to be proportional to my book pages and my stamp. So we're starting out with a brown base card that measures 8 inches by 10.5 inches, and then it's scored at 5.25 inches, and it just makes it the right proportion for my book pages. And then my pop of colour for this card is this mint green, which you can see on the piece of card and on my finger because I have made one of these cards earlier. So we're going to fold our base card in half and then we're going to get on with preparing our book pages. So I'm starting out by removing the edges of my 2 book pages, and that makes the text across this piece measure 3.5 inches. And then before I remove the top and the bottom of one of these pieces, I'm just going to stamp the image to make sure that I've got her nicely placed on the text. So this is a Gorjuss stamp and I'm inking up with archival ink. And I'm going to stamp her right in the middle of the panel. It's quite appropriate because she's standing on a lovely pile of books. And I've had this stamp quite a while and it's called New Heights, so I'm not sure if it's still available by the time you actually get to see this tutorial, but it really doesn't matter because any of the Gorjuss range of stamps would work for this particular technique as well as many others. It doesn't just have to be a figure, it could be flowers and you could use the same technique. So I'm putting the 2 pieces back together now that I've stamped my image, and I'm going to remove the top and the bottom of the page in the same way, tearing against the edge of the ruler, and the panel ends up measuring 3.5 inches by 6.25 inches. Now I decided to keep the colours simple on this, so I've got the brown as the background because that's the colour that I'm going to be using to highlight the image on the book page, and I'm going to be using this green. So I want to tear a couple of pieces of card, one for the outside of the card and one for the inside, and again I'm using that same tearing technique and I'm going to create a mat for the image. So I'm just making this slightly bigger, so it's 1/2 inch bigger all round, so it's 4 inches by 6.75 inches, and I'm going to do that twice because I'm going to use the same green panel for the inside of the card. A little tip about tearing your paper. This is quite a thin ruler and I find that it works better with a thinner ruler, and also it works better if you consciously pull against the ruler, so you're lifting your paper and actually pulling it at a slight angle against the edge of your ruler, and that way you get a nice neat tear, if that's not a contradiction of terms. So we want to tear, but we don't want it to be too random. So 1 piece for the outside and 1 piece for the inside. And then I want to top and tail the inside piece of card, and we already started tearing, and I just want to create 2 little strips, and I'm just using my ruler as a guide, and I'm doing one slightly wider than the other. Top piece measures 4 by 1.25 and the bottom piece 4 by 1.5. Now to do this technique you're going to have to cut out an image of your stamp. And I didn't have a post-it note big enough, but not to worry, because for what we're going to do, I can sandwich my post-it notes together. So I'm using the sticky edges of my post-it note just to create a slightly bigger piece of post-it note, and then I'm going to stamp my image right in the middle. The image doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need to be able to cut it out quite exactly around the outside edge. You can see the paint of my finger is coming off nicely against the packing tape. And I'm covering the entire image with sellotape or packing tape, and you'll see why I'm doing that when we get to the technique itself. So once you're happy that you've covered your entire image with the shiny sellotape, I've got a little bit of book there still to cover, and then I'm going to cut the whole image out. Now this is where you need to be accurate in your cutting out. You don't want to have any sort of undercutting or overcutting. You want it as perfect as possible. I have no idea why I've chosen these great big scissors looking at this now. And there are a few little fiddly bits on this stamp, but bear this in mind, if you're not the world's best cutter outer, choose stamped images that are a little bit easier to cut out. So sometimes it's easy to get rid of the majority of the paper and then to go in and cut out the finer details of your stamped image. And here she is, all cut out, blending nicely with my craft mat. So you've got the properties of the post-it note. So you've got the sticky area of the post-it note, which will hold the mask in place. And you've got the shiny surface that we've created with the sellotape, which is going to be the thing that works and makes this technique work. And it really is a great way to highlight your stamped images on a book page, or in fact any other paper. You can use this technique on other papers as well, other pattern papers maybe. So the sky's the limit on what you can use this for, but it really does look particularly effective on a book page. So I'm using some antique linen to start with, and I'm just gently brushing the ink using an ink blending tool. This is Distress ink, and you can see I'm blending from the stamped image outwards onto the book page. So I'm being quite generous with how far I blend this out, but it's still quite a light application of ink. You can see when I lift this up, she's already starting to highlight. And you might want to stop there, but I'm going to take this one step further. And now I'm going to highlight again, but with a slightly darker ink, and I'm going to be using walnut stain this time. And you can see this time I don't brush out quite so far with the ink. So I'm still starting on the shiny surface of the mask and then blending out, but not so far onto the book page. So I get a graduated blend of ink from dark to light. So dark nearest the image and slightly light the further out onto the page you go. And you just want to work that all the way around. And then the magic reveal, because you've got the shiny surface, that ink has blended beautifully out onto your book page. And how fabulous does that look? Now put that carefully to one side, because you'll be able to use it time and time again. So I need to make these little strips that are going to go on the inside of the card match what we have just done on the outside of the card. I'm trying to be a little bit careful to support the paper as I brush the ink, which is the antique linen, over these little strips of book page. So that's my first application of colour. And then I'm going to just darken the edges one bit further with the walnut stain. And again, I'm not taking the ink quite so far in to the book page this time. So that makes those two pieces match our stamped image a little bit better. And I just want to make my flowers match my project. Now I did have a couple of plain flowers. These are pale green, but they just weren't quite the right colour. And so I'm going to give them a little bit of a paint and a little bit of a stamp. So I'm using a mint green acrylic paint, which is very similar to the cardstock that I've been using. And I'm colouring one of them completely with the green, quite dark, and then using the residue of what's left on my little piece of dry foam to lightly colour the second flower. And I'm also going to be using the same acrylic paint to add some green details into my little stamped image. So using a fine brush, I'm just going to pick out some of the details. So she's got a tiny little heart in her hair. She's got polka dots on her dress. Just a little detail around the petticoat and the neckline and sleeves. Then she's going to have mint green stripy tights. And then I'm just going to pick out a few details on the little stack of books. And it's just enough colour to bring the whole design together. So by adding the mint green into the image in just small details, it really does look effective once I mount it onto the mint green frame. And because I ended up storing my stamps in an envelope, I'm using actually the packaging box that came with these stamps as a paint palette, because I can throw it away once I've finished. So I'm going to be mounting up the little girl onto the mint green frame. And as usual, I'm going to be using glue to do this, but you could be using double-sided tape if you want to. The inside of the card, I'm going to be stamping this simple birthday greeting. And the beauty of stamping in black archival is that if you make a little bit of a mistake, you can always touch up the stamped image with a black pen. And I didn't put enough pressure in the middle of the stamp, so I'm just tidying that up a little bit. And then we can stick the little strips, the wider strip at the bottom and the narrower strip at the top. Again, I'm using glue. And I'm also going to be using some little teeny tiny butterflies, and this little stamp does come with the New Heights set of stamps. I'm adding a couple of those butterflies to the front of the card, and then I'm stamping them 5 times onto the mint green cardstock. And then I've got a little text stamp in my collection. This one's from Rubber Dance, and I'm just stamping onto the light green flower. And that little stamp was an art definition, so it's appropriate for when I'm making a card. Finally deciding to remove my acrylic nail varnish. And to finish off that flower, I'm just taking a little bit of that walnut stain ink around the very edges of the petals. And they're going to be layered up on the front of the card. So the next thing that you want to do is to cut out the 5 little butterflies. And I am not keeping the antenna on, I'm just going to snip those off. Ouch! At least I didn't tear their wings off. So that's 5 little butterflies and we're ready to put this card together. And this actually is a very quick video for my normal standards, I think you'll agree. And I'm just giving a little bit of shape to the wings of the butterflies and a tiny dot of glue in where the body attaches to the card. And everywhere I've stamped a butterfly, I'm going to add a decoupaged set of wings. And that really does look great against the mint green background. Here's one I stamped earlier. And then I'm going to attach the inner to the inside of the card. I'm just centering it up nicely. And then I want to add that flower detail to the panel before I attach it to the card. So I'm starting out by layering up the dark green flower first. And then I realise I've actually got 2 flowers here. So I'm going to peel those apart and save one for later on. I'm definitely going to use the printed version. I'm just fluffing up the petals a little bit. To give it a little bit more texture. And then again, I'm adding a dot of glue to the centre of the flower and then just twisting it slightly so it's slightly staggered over the dark green flower. And I can add the butterflies in place. And then shaping the wings and attaching them where their body naturally lies. And the same for the second butterfly. And then I'm going to tie on a button. So this is a button that's got 2 holes, and I'm going to show you a way that I saw on, I think it was a Pinterest board somewhere along the lines, and it stuck in my head, and I just thought it was a really neat way to attach a button. So you're going to double up your cotton, this is cotton string, and poke it through the hole, and then I'm just going to pull through a little bit of a loop and then tuck the ends of the string around and through, and that links the button to the thread. And I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. Now if you want your button to one side, you need to make sure that your thread is long enough on the long side and to allow you to position the button where you want to on the card. Again, pushing through that loop and just hooking the ends through to trap the button on the piece of cotton. And you can see what I mean about making sure that one side of the string is longer than the other if you want to put your button to one side of your card. And then I'm just going to get some tape. Hurry up and get that tape. And then I'm just going to flip that over and catch that string into place. Now if you want to, you can take them both over together, or you can just open them out a little bit, it's up to you. I start thinking that it's going to be opened out. And then just opening it out a little bit on the opposite side. So trying to make the sort of distance that the 2 strings are apart the same, and trying to keep that wrap even across the bottom of the card panel. A little bit fiddly where you keep hold of everything until you get that sellotape in place. And then I can just trim off that little bit of excess string. Then again, I'm going to glue that to the front of the card. And I'm really happy with how that's turned out. You could do this in lots of different colour combinations, and as I said before, this technique does lend itself to all sorts of stamps and images. It looks fab if you have lots of just sort of flowers dotted about on a book page, and each one of those is inked and sort of thrown into relief on the book page. And there we have our gorgeous card. And I really hope that you give this technique a go. So there she is. And you can just about see that I've just given a little smudge of that ink colour on her cheeks just to give her face a little bit more definition. And the inside matches the outside. So once I get this uploaded onto the internet, that'll be another little bit of space that I can reclaim back on my computer. So I'm feeling very, very virtuous. I've finished off project 1 UFO tick is now finished, and I look forward to sharing more of these projects with you as I find them, and hopefully I can get them up and shared as soon as possible. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button and the share button. It all helps me build my channel, and it is much appreciated, as are your comments. Don't forget to leave me a comment if you want to, and any questions that you have I will make every effort to answer. Until next time, thank you for watching.